let's talk about the anxious attachment style. This is one of the most common attachment styles that are in the world. Obviously, it's in the name. This style has a very anxious attachment. We learned that when we're attaching to a lover, a caregiver, etc., there tends to be some needs that have been largely unmet. But this doesn't mean that there was no love. It just means that this style of attachment, or rather somebody with the anxious attachment style, has trouble self-validating, and as a result they feel much more anxious. So if you have the anxious attachment style, it will look something like this. You're probably often worried about your relationships, and you seek reassurance and affection to counter that worry. Or you've probably found yourself in several toxic relationships, because it's better than having no relationship. It's better than being alone. People who have the anxious attachment style, they tend to struggle with communicating their needs directly, and it always comes from that fear of, if I communicate my needs in a way that is direct or blunt or straightforward, well then, hey, maybe the person I am communicating them to won't listen, and what was the point? Needless conflict. B. If I communicate my needs, I won't get them. The other person will get frustrated with me, and they'll leave. That's a big fear when it comes to the anxious attachment style, a fear of being abandoned. And since the anxious attachment style has trouble doing self-soothing, it just gives into the throes of anxiety. That fear can seem even more real since we have no way to talk ourselves out of that fear. They tend to act out when they're triggered or jealous, insecure, or anxious to have that feeling removed. It is a gut reaction, very emotional. It simply means that you're more likely. There are no absolutes or guarantees when it comes to stuff like this. It's in the mind, and because it's in the mind, it operates on a spectrum. And so if you have the anxious attachment style, well, that may be your normal, your status quo. Whenever it comes to the mind is always a spectrum, so you can be on a scale of 1 to 10. You could be a 2 on the anxious scale, or you could be at 8 where it's extreme anxiety, extremely hard to self-soothe. So I figured I just want to say that. Now the anxious attachment style struggles when their partner shows inconsistent behaviors, or when their partner unexpectedly pulls away, even if nothing's wrong. Now because this has happened, this leads them, the anxious attachment style person, to feel worried. And when we are worried about our standing in a situation, we tend to cling tighter, which almost always leads to the anxious attachment style person sort of over-smothering or over-pursuing even a secure partner. In other words, if you have the anxious attachment style, and your partner is having a bad day, they got yelled at by their boss, they got in the car accident, something like that, and they pull away, this does not necessarily mean you did anything wrong, or anything to cause that. However, because of their inconsistency, and because of your insecurities, you're not sure where you stand with this person. Now they come home, they're in a bad mood. You feel as though you did something wrong, and there's that bit of fear or anxiety that manifests itself in you. You compound it because rather than thinking, they're just having a bad day, it's not a big deal, I'll leave him alone, maybe bring him some dinner, and that will be that. But because someone has anxious attachment, they're much more likely to act in a way that is anxious, and so they will begin over-pursuing or clinging or badgering the partner with constant questions. And even if partner's secure, they can feel smothered. It just is what it is. And if the partner is avoidant, meaning you're anxious and a person you're dating is avoidant, which happens to be so often the case, it can lead to a very unhealthy cycle, and this cycle is called the anxious avoidant trap. One person is always chasing, the other person's always running. They're running because you're chasing, and you're chasing because they're running. It's a cycle. It's a black hole that you can get stuck into. And the best thing you can do, if you see that you are stuck in that cycle, is stop chasing. Back away. Give them their space. They're running for a reason. You're